Danilo Turk, Peter Bear, Member Parliament of Germany, Ambassador Sujan Chinoy, Director General Manoeuver Institute for Defense Studies Analysis, India, and Lynn Cook, Shangri-La Das Senior Fellow for Asia Pacific Security, IISS, International Institute of Strategic Studies, based in Singapore. So let me start with a very soft and easy question to all the panelists. We are 1 year since the Russian invasion of Ukraine. There's a lot of talk about China's timetable for reunification of Taiwan with the mainland. And of course, considering that the Taiwanese are not going to be willingly agree to a reunification with the mainland, what are the prospects for China using force to accomplish this particular goal? And what is the likely timetable for any such military operation? Ambassador Chinoy, what do you think of from an Indian perspective, what do you think of the Chinese possible timetable to kind of reunite Taiwan with the mainland? So do you think that is a feasibility of doing China using force to do that?
Thank you. I think before we address that issue, we must see the differences between the situation in Ukraine and the situation across the Taiwan Strait. The first difference is that Ukraine is a member of the United Nations, and Taiwan has not been a member since the passage of UNGA Resolution 2758 of 25 October 1971, when the General Assembly decided to remove Chiang Kai-shek and his representatives. Mind you, it did not refer to either Taiwan or to the Republic of China. And when they brought in what they called the legitimate entry of the People's Republic of China. Having said that, Ukraine did not have a treaty alliance partnership before the war broke out. In the case of Taiwan, although the Mutual Defense Treaty of 1954 petered out during Jimmy Carter's time in 1979, it was seamlessly integrated, it segued into the Taiwan Relations Act, as you are aware, of 1979, which has two fundamental tenets. One is that unification must be peaceful and that any other scenario would be resisted by the United States of America, and that secondly, the United States would provide necessary arms and military assistance for the defensive purposes required by Taiwan. Now the question is, what exactly are the timelines? As far as China is concerned, it's been very consistent saying that this is a historic mission. And there are two centenary goals. The first one is already over by 2021, making China a moderately well-off society. But it's the second centenary goal which is in fact relevant to Taiwan. China hopes to achieve the China Dream by 2049. I dare say that no Chinese leader can stand on the rostrum of the Forbidden City at Tiananmen Square and declare the achievement of the China Dream without reunification. So in my view, essentially there is a timeline called 2049. Would China do it? I doubt it, because it is likely to derail China's own economic trajectory, and the costs of sanctions and restrictions, international isolation would be very huge. At the same time, if China were to do it, how would it do it? I think there are three scenarios here. One is to use the missile capability across the Taiwan Strait, which Taiwan has developed since the 94-95 Taiwan Strait crisis, which was effectively a very important one when the US had sent out carrier battle groups as well. Incidentally, since then, the carrier battle groups of the United States have gone in my view, please correct me if I'm wrong, only once, when the USS Kitty Hawk went in 2007 for an R&R visit to Hong Kong, which was refused, and on the way back, the US steamed through the Taiwan Strait. Since then, the US performs its right to traverse these straits, but has not sent a carrier battle group. Mind you, that's important in naval terms. Now, missile attack is one thing, but the Taiwanese also have considerable missile capabilities. The second way to do it is to mount a naval invasion. And I think traversing 180 miles of open sea would really decimate any such operation. The third is essentially to mount an economic embargo and a blockade. But this too will threaten the United States and Japan and Australia when it comes to free trade in the Western Pacific. I have absolutely no doubt that were the Chinese to try to sort of take off and in a different direction and use force against Taiwan in accordance with their 2005 anti-secession law, the United States will directly be involved. Japan, which considers Taiwan to be its outer periphery in terms of security, will 100% be involved. I dare say even Australia will be involved.
Thank you. Ambassador Chinoy, a question about the global south. And there's, on Ukraine, you have seen significant support for Ukraine, generally global support. But also some parts of the global south, this is especially in Africa, this has not been really the case. They have not been as enthusiastic about calling out Russia by name for the invasion. Are we going to see something slightly differently if it comes to, if there is a crisis over Taiwan? And I'm asking this given that there is significant Chinese economic investment, aid, infrastructure projects and so on and so forth. So what kind of support are we likely to see from a global south, especially in the African context, for a Taiwan crisis?
So first we need to look at the possibility of an immediate crisis. I painted to you a longer term timetable in terms of 2049, the so-called achievement of the China dream, which would be impossible for any leader to declare without some kind of reunification. What is possible in the immediate future is a potential takeover, theoretically, hypothetically speaking, of the islands that are outlying, Chinman and Matsu, which are within 10 nautical miles of the mainland. Now, some of you may recall that when the Mutual Defense Treaty was concluded in December 1954, its description is very clearly limited to Taiwan and the Penghu Islands, that is the Pescadores. Yeah. It does not include the outlying islands, and therefore, even after the conclusion of the Mutual Defense Treaty, in the first and the second Taiwan Strait crisis, China bombarded those islands. This theoretically is possible even today. More than that, it is theoretically possible for China to mount an invasion of these two islands and take them over without necessarily triggering the Taiwan Relations Act, which also has the same description, limited to Taiwan and the Penghu Islands. That being said, why would China do that? It is a possible face-saving device before 2049. It is a scenario in which these lightly defended islands may not be worth, for the United States, the game may not be worth the candle, so that's a possibility. The action at the UN is limited. It's in favor of China, not just because Taiwan is not a member, but because virtually every country in the world except 13 have recognized the People's Republic of China. And we have seen in the past that the divisions are also to be seen within the allies. For instance, when in 1950, Taiwan, that is Formosa, took a resolution, as in proposed a resolution at the United Nations as Resolution 87 of 29 September 1950, the UK and the USA voted differently. On the eve of UN General Assembly Resolution 2758, which I mentioned earlier, of 25 October 1971, the UK had actually, sort of proposed views against the USA, which was trying to provide a parallel seat and participation to Taiwan. So I think generally speaking, whether it's the G77 plus China grouping, whether it's Africa, the dice is generally loaded against Taiwan. Now in Africa, you know that the Chinese have trade worth roughly $285 billion. They have investments worth $70 billion. And although the United States is ramping up its presence in Africa considerably, the fly in the ointment here is that many of the Millennium Challenge Corporation projects also cannot altogether avoid Belt and Road type of projects. In other words, Chinese companies also bid for MCC projects. So that's the irony over there. The G7 is united today on giving Taiwan space in the World Health Assembly, or for instance the ICAO, or for instance the UN Framework for Climate Change Convention. That's the space in which the world can actually help Taiwan.
Okay, great. Thanks.